Hi, welcome to today's episode of Asian American Focus. Our special guest today is Professor Steph Tai, who teaches at the University of Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's great to see you. You look like you have not aged in the last 20 odd years.
Same with you. So, hey, yay for being Asian.
So where are you right now?
I'm actually visiting my girlfriend who's in Urbana. So I'm hanging out in her house in Urbana. Since all places are pretty much the same now because we can't go out. So
yeah. So how was the flight and everything? Did you feel safe being on the plane?
Well, I flew back to Madison, but we just drove to Urbana. Only like 4 hours from Madison. But I flew back from California to Madison, and that felt fairly safe. But now it's probably not safe anymore because when I was flying, like United was still doing distancing within the airplane. So no one sat next to each other unless you were part of the same party. So everyone was spaced out and everyone had to wear masks. But I think they're going away from that now.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, that's if anything's getting better. It's just getting
I know. People are acting like things are fine and it's not.
Yeah. Well, so what's going on with your school then? Has your university issued any policies about going back to school?
No, they said something like, what was it? I don't know. They have a plan. The plan isn't great. A lot of faculty are opposed to it because some faculty are worried they're going to have to teach in person. The law school has been good. The law school has said, look, if you have any reason why you don't think you should teach in person, just let us know and you can teach in remote in the fall. And that's what I'm going to do because I have a friend that I live with in Madison and she has lupus. And so like, I don't want to bring anything into the house. So
yeah, totally. And I remember you've said something on Facebook about how you were living in a dorm or something.
Oh, I was living in a dorm in California. That was weird.
What? What were you doing?
It was like the cheapest way to find like small furnished housing. Because like otherwise I'd have to rent a whole home because like the only other places that were furnished were like sabbatical homes, and I don't need a whole home. It was just me. So I lived in a dorm and that was hilarious.
Yeah, isn't that great? You feel like a student again, right?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it was weird because I didn't really talk to my dorm mates because they were Indonesian. It was like they were freshmen and they kind of were learning English. So it was, very quiet.
Yeah. Well, what were you doing there in California?
I was just on my sabbatical and doing some research on food stuff, food history, because I want to write a book on how laws shape the meaning of food.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
That'll be fun.
Yeah. Well, so you probably know about some like really old food act, and that's why they can't have those, what's those called? Those like chocolate eggs from Germany that have toys inside.
Oh, yeah. Because of like the potential safety kind of hazard for.
Yeah. So that's why I think like they can sell them in the US now, but it has to be like packaged differently. I can't even remember, but I remember.
Yeah. People are really into that Kinder Egg thing. Yeah.
Well, interesting. So anyway, maybe we should start from the beginning since anybody watching this interview is probably not going to know anything about you. So you want to just act like I don't know you, like where did you grow up and tell me about your childhood and your parents?
Okay. I grew up in the South. I grew up in first Jackson, well, long story, but Lexington, Kentucky, Jackson, Mississippi, Memphis, Tennessee. I lived in all those places because my parents were sort of itinerant scientists as things go. My mom was pursuing an academic career, eventually gave that up. My dad got into medical consulting, and that's how we ended up in Memphis. But we moved around a bit in the South and eventually ended up in the suburbs of Memphis.
Wow. So were your parents like grad students or something when they came over to the U.S.?
Yeah, they came over to the U.S. as grad students. And eventually, the way we ended up in Kentucky was that my mom was a postdoc there. My dad was unemployed. And so he ended up going back to school and studying sort of medical radiology, which is sort of the kind of thing that chemists and physicists can do to sort of help consult with radiologists in terms of doing x-ray treatment. So that's how we ended up in Kentucky. And then my mom got a job teaching at Jackson State in Jackson, Mississippi. And so we ended up there for a while. And then eventually she gave that up and then we went to Memphis.
Okay. So are your parents from Hong Kong or China or where?
Yeah, they're from Hong Kong. My mom has a long history where she wasn't originally from Hong Kong. She was born in Vietnam, moved a bunch of places, and ended up in Hong Kong. But my dad was born and raised in Hong Kong.
Oh, okay. And then were they already married when they came over?
Oh no, they met in college. So they met in, I think, freshman year of college in the same chemistry class. My dad invited himself over to study because he figured he could get free dinner from my mom's parents, which he did. And then they, ended up dating. And they both went to grad school in the U.S., but they went to different grad schools. So they were long distance for a while.
Oh, okay. And then where were you born?
I was born in Arizona, actually, during one of my mom's postdocs. I know. So this is the sort of problem with academia, both in the sort of, legal academic sense, but any academic sense. You end up where you end up. And so that's how they ended up there.
Oh, okay. How interesting. Okay. And then you also have a brother, right? A younger brother?
Yeah, I have a younger brother. He's
what
the
does he do?
fulfillment of my parents' dreams. He's a doctor. Yeah.
I see. Okay. And do your parents still live in Tennessee?
Yep, they're still there. They're in a retirement community there now.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. So where would you really call home then? Tennessee? Is that where you really?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'd call Tennessee home. I've moved around so much, so it's not like I've lived in any single place for that long. I mean, Tennessee, I lived there for probably about, 10 years. And by now I've lived in Madison longer than that. So, yeah, so it's,
Wow, time flies. Yeah, because
I know, it's weird.
Like, oh, you just moved to Wisconsin,
Right. Well, years as we get older, it goes more quickly
than years when you were like a child prodigy, right? Because didn't you go to college at a very early age?
Yeah, I don't like to think of myself as prodigy, but I did go to college when I was 15. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about your childhood, and did you go to regular public schools, and did you feel different?
I actually went to a private school that I had like a full scholarship to because I got really good test scores. So in effect, it was, it was free, but I was in a private school. It was fine. I was bullied a lot because I was young. Wasn't great. I was really happy to actually graduate and go to college.
Oh, but then how did you manage to graduate early? Did they let you skip grades or something?
Yeah, I started school early and then I skipped 2 grades, sort of. I skipped like 7th grade and then my junior year.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'd sort of taken a lot of classes just already.
Mm-hmm. And did your parents kind of give you extra tutoring or teaching on the side?
Yeah. They did all that stuff about, like, my mom did like SAT test tutoring and, she tried to make me memorize all these things in preparation for med school, which, hey, I got sex education when I was like 7 and memorized all the Latin names for things. And it was actually kind of horrible. She made me cry with sex ed.
That's weird. Okay.
Yeah, she was like, why can't you remember the names? Your brother can remember the names and he's 4. I'm like,
Okay, so you're like learning about vas deferens or something?
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't care.
Okay, well, interesting. Okay, so you were really happy to leave for college even though you're still very young at the time?
Yeah, no, it was like freedom. So it was actually, people are like, oh, was it horrible going to college really young? I'm like, no, I was not around bullies. I got to be free from my parents. I got to hang out with kids, like other people. I didn't tell them how old I was and people didn't figure out for a while. So it was fine.
Yeah. And then did you go to MIT for undergrad?
Yeah.
Okay. What was your major there?
Chemistry.
Oh, okay. So what was MIT like?
It was good. It was actually a really good place to go when you're super young because there are other super young people and also everyone's socially awkward, or many people are, so that you don't stand out that much by being socially awkward. So it was actually really great.
Mm-hmm. And what was the sex ratio though? I mean, did you feel just kind of odd being like, I'm just assuming there weren't as many girls compared to the boys, or? Yeah,
so there weren't as many now actually it's, I think, almost half and half, but at the time it was like, I think 35% to 65%. So not nearly as bad as I applied to Caltech. And their ratio was much smaller at the time. It was like 15% female. But it wasn't really bad. I in high school and stuff, I hung around with guys mostly anyway, so it didn't really feel that different.
Yeah, I see. And did you live in the dorms at MIT?
Yeah, I lived in the dorms.
Yeah. Well, so what was life like there? Like, did you have a lot of fun enjoying Boston, or were you mostly like doing stuff on campus in the labs all the time?
I was mostly on campus. I was a big role player at the time, so we did live action role playing before that was even really a thing. So I spent a lot of time, which now I vaguely regret because I could have been maybe more disciplined, but no, spent a lot of times playing role playing games.
Okay, and that's on the computer?
No. We did live action role playing games. So we wrote up character sheets for everyone, and everyone had a specific role to play, and we would just kind of play on campus like for like 10 days at a time.
Oh, okay.
It was really intense.
Never heard about that when I was in college. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, what kind of other things did you get involved in at MIT?
I did public service work, so I volunteered at the Public Service Center and also with this other organization that did more public service work. And I also sang in a choir, so I sang with an a cappella group.
Oh, I didn't know you sang.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. So do you still do any of that, just for fun?
No, I just do karaoke.
Okay. Well, great. Well, what do you think is some of your best songs?
I don't know if I sang particularly well, but I liked arranging music more. So I arranged a really good, like, early Ani DeFranco song that I think the group still sings. So I'm like kind of proud of that.
Oh, that's great. And then do you play musical instruments too?
I played piano growing up, but I don't have a piano, so I don't now practice. I learned to play guitar later on, but that's, and I do have a guitar, so every now and then I'll pick that up to practice.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that sounds great that you were able to juggle the rigor of academic pressure at MIT with some other activities.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. It was, it was a fun time.
Yeah. And then what happened after MIT?
So I went to, so at MIT, I happened to work with a chemist who later on got the Nobel Prize for his research on the ozone hole, basically one of the sort of whistleblowers about that. Mm-hmm. And so I got interested in sort of atmospheric chemistry because of that. And so I went to grad school to study atmospheric chemistry, and I looked at the global warming potentials of various refrigerants. That was what I studied in grad school. But it was partly driven by being exposed to this as an undergrad. And so that's how I ended up in grad school. And then in grad school, at some point, I took some policy classes, and I was like, people don't really listen to scientists. Oh. Sadly, they still don't. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go and do something to actually get science across to the public. At the time, I didn't totally understand the difference between policy and law, which now we both know. But I said, okay, well, I guess I'll study to go to law school and figure out how to do stuff there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you were in grad school at Tufts, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. How many years were you at Tufts?
I was there for 5 years.
Oh, okay. Did you get a PhD there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then did you go straight on to law school, or did you work for a while?
Yeah, no, I defended my dissertation a week before starting law school, which I don't recommend.
What was your dissertation about? Was it about the ozone layer, or?
No, it was about the global warming potentials of CFC substitutes. So chlorofluorocarbons were the compounds that ended up being the cause of the ozone layer depletion, right? So it was because like these radicals form such that it destroys ozone. Anyway, they ended up through the sort of worldwide agreements regarding ozone depleting compounds, the world ended up adopting other compounds in replacement for the chlorofluorocarbons. And those were hydrofluorocarbons. And these were things that broke up less in the atmosphere, which meant in turn they depleted ozone less, but in turn they end up actually having a greater greater global warming potential than the chlorofluorocarbons, which end up just getting broken down. And so that's what I actually studied in grad school, was a sort of related compound, the substitutes for chlorofluorocarbons, but I studied their global warming potential.
Mm-hmm. I see. And so, but what led you to decide, well, I'm going to apply to law school while I'm still in grad school right now? I mean, was there some role model or mentor that you had or something?
No, not really. It was just taking some policy classes and just, like I said, realizing that people don't necessarily listen to science, and the science doesn't actually come across to policymakers and lawmakers in the same way as if there was, some kind of advocate for them.
Mm-hmm. I see. And then how'd you wind up at Georgetown then?
Mix of reasons. Partly I was dating someone in DC. We broke up, so it worked. I'm lucky that it worked out fine, but in retrospect, I probably could have thought through this a little bit more. But wanted to be in DC. It was the best school I got in there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. And then, so how was law school as an experience? I mean, it's kind of interesting on YouTube. There are so many like young law school students or people applying to law school that are creating, vlogs or YouTube channels now about it. But, I feel like there's like a void in information from people that have already graduated from law school and are practicing, or like you, who's in legal academia. So, I mean, did you enjoy your law school experience at Georgetown?
I did, and that's where I'm gonna, say to all the students out here who are listening, or all the potential law students out there, I would say I had a very unusual experience. I mean, partly because I just defended my dissertation a week before starting law school. I thought law school was so much easier. Because so in grad school, you don't know if you're going to get your PhD. You spend the whole time fretting and you're wondering if your research is going to work out. And if your research doesn't work out, you're screwed. You're not going to get your degree that you're going for. You might leave with a master's, that's fine. But I was so stressed at my dissertation defense that it felt like law school. I was like, okay, at least I don't have to worry. Even if I don't do that well, I'm probably not going to fail out. I'm probably going to get the JD. It was for me a lot less pressure. Again, I say this is an unusual experience because most people are finding it to be a super stressful thing because they're coming at it either from undergrad or from different experiences. But I actually found it to be relatively unstressful. I kind of enjoyed it as I was like, oh, I get to read. I'm not standing up in lab all the time. I can just sit and read, and that was kind of nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And then were you able to get involved with a lot of stuff on campus? I mean, weren't you involved with APALSA or other organizations? Yeah,
I was pretty involved with APALSA, Outlaw at the time, which I think has a different name. I also, the Environmental Law Society, and I also worked on my law journal, which was at the time, the Georgetown International Environmental Law Journal, and now Law Review, and now it's become just a sort of general environmental law review.
Oh, okay. And you were the editor, right?
Yeah. So I really enjoyed working on that too.
Yeah. And then while you were in law school, what did you do during the summers?
I worked for Justice one summer, which is in their international section, and they're a sort of environmental litigation kind of group. And then the next summer I worked for the Department of Justice in the Environment and Natural Resources section.
Mm-hmm. So they were both in DC?
No, the one was in the Earth Justice was in San Francisco. Now it's not. Now it's in Oakland. But at the time it was in San Francisco, and then the other one was in DC.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So what kind of things? I mean, if you recall, what did you work on when you were at those places?
Earth Justice, I looked at some of the. I did research on some of the expropriations provisions of NAFTA. And so to explain some more, expropriations are like the international version of takings. What happens if a country either takes physical property or actually regulates something such that it has the effect of taking physical property. And there's expropriations kind of adjudication provisions contained in NAFTA. And I did research on how that would impact certain kind of domestic and the power of the different states, US, Mexico, Canada, to enact different kind of environmental restrictions. So that's what I worked on there primarily. At DOJ, I did a lot of different litigation. I was in the appellate section. So I did briefs for, I didn't do briefs, I did memos for attorneys who were working on appellate litigation. And I also helped work on an amicus in an appellate litigation that another attorney was working on. So it was very appellate kind of focus, which again, rare experience because that's really not much of what most people's legal practice is. But it is what often gets taught in law school, and I happen to have a very academic experience while in practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then when you graduated, did you start working for the Department of Justice?
I took a year off in between to clerk. So I clerked for a judge on the Sixth Circuit, which is a federal appellate court in Memphis, actually. So I lived at home with my parents.
Oh, that's nice. So you got to spend some time back with your parents again.
Yeah. Also saved a lot of money. If you want to do a more public interest government career, it's important to save because law school costs so much. So so that's what I did.
Oh, okay. And, to those students out there who might be watching this, like, can you give a quick rundown of the procedures when people want to apply to be judicial clerks?
Let me just explain what judicial clerks are. They're kind of, I like to explain it like they're like the postdoc of the legal world. That is, it's a way to get solid experience with a judge for like 1 year or 2 years. It depends on the clerkship. And sort of, focus on developing your legal skills in a practice-based, but, courtroom-based kind of manner. And so what happens is you apply, usually it's after your, so this is where it gets weird. In my time and your time, it was you apply after like in the fall of your second year. Now it's kind of in the summer after your second year, but not really because the judges kind of cheat. So it's been pushing back. So there's a timeline. By the time people are, listeners are out applying for clerkships, it'll probably be different by then. But right now it's a little bit kind of in the summer after your second year. You apply for clerkships, 2 different judges. And now for federal judges, there's a whole database. It's called Oscar. And you just put in your writing samples, your resume, and then the school will contact your references, and your references will upload a letter of recommendation. And so you need 3 letters of recommendation, and then writing sample, and then your resume, and that gets sent off automatically to all the judges. Back in the day, we actually had to paper fold things and do stuff, but now everything's online. So that's the general process.
Yeah. And then, when you applied, did you just send out an application to a bunch of different judges you were interested in?
Yeah, that's what I did. Now, again, it's much easier. You just click a checkbox for each of the judges that you apply to. I mean, you don't want to apply to too many because it actually costs a bit of money. I mean, I don't know how much it costs. It's not an insane amount of money, but, you don't want to just click everyone.
Oh, okay. I see. Great. So then you did the clerkship, and then you wound up at Department of Justice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I applied for what's called the honors program. Many government agencies have what's called an honors program, which is a way to let in new attorneys either straight from law school or from clerkships. Usually, they have a whole separate kind of process for people who are applying what they call laterally from some other position. But I applied through the honors program, and I happened to get in.
Yeah, I know. I remember hearing that it's very competitive.
Yeah, I was very excited. So it was cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then do they also have some sort of streamlined interview program where there's a deadline for people to apply for the honors program?
Yeah, there's a special deadline for it. I think it's now online. Everything's now online. Back in the day, it was not online, but now it's online. And then they do. So I don't know how they're doing it now. For a while, they were doing regional interviews. When I was doing it, it was like a DC interview. I think they might be moving on to Skype interviews just to make things easier for applicants, but I'm not really sure. But yeah, there's a whole streamlined interview process that's just dedicated to the honors program.
Yeah. Okay. So
they put you in a boot camp when you're there. So each of the honors so each of the different divisions. So there's the environmental division, there's civil rights, there's civil, there's criminal, there's tax, there's antitrust. Each of them have separate sort of trainings for all the honors attorneys that are going in there, so they get up to speed more quickly. So there's also a sort of little orientation thing that's geared up just for the honors attorneys, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great. So you felt very prestigious being part of this group, huh?
Well, also it was nice just to have a class of people. I know all the people that I came in with. We hung out because we were just all newbies the same year. So that was kind of nice to have a cohort.
Yeah, that's great. And so were you continuing to live in the same place in DC?
No, by then I had, because I was living with Georgetown. Yeah, I was living at Georgetown housemates. When I moved back, everyone had sort of spread out. So I actually ended up getting a apartment with one of the other honors attorneys. So we'd known each other from being summer interns there, and we knew we were coming back, so we just kept in touch, and we're like, okay, let's just find an apartment together.
Okay, great. Okay, so are you able to talk a little bit about what things you worked on at DOJ, or is that kind of top secret?
I mean, I can talk in general. In general, I worked on, because I was in the appellate section of the Environment and Natural Resources Division, I just did appellate cases. So they could be appeals from lower court decisions regarding takings cases. I had some takings cases. There could be appeals regarding, whether or not an agency performed adequate environmental review. I had one endangered species case. It was just a number of cases, but the way that the appellate section worked was I just took cases that were already handled before by a trial attorney, and so the record was kind of focused. I did no discovery because you don't get to at the appellate level, and it was just very focused on sort of briefing the law. But it was kind of nice to have that kind of very focused experience.
Yeah, I see. Well, interesting. And then, how long did you work there?
I worked there for 3.5 years.
Mm-hmm. And then after that, where did you go?
I went to Washington Lee for a visiting professor position. And the way that you get a lot of these positions for teaching market, do you want me to talk about that a little bit?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So the teaching market is a weird market in that it's also now all an online application where you send in your CV, recommendations, writing samples, and all this stuff, and it gets put in a big centralized database where all the schools can look at you. And so you don't really apply to individual schools, you just put your data out there. Yeah. And then the schools look through everyone's stuff to see if they want to interview you. And then that all happens at this one hotel in DC, the Marriott Wardman Park.
Yeah, I heard that it might be shutting down.
So scarily though, I think I've read some stuff that it might be closing.
Yeah, I just saw an article like last week or something, and that's sad. I mean, but it is an old hotel.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of like historic, well, for many reasons, but also for law school market reasons.
Yeah.
So I applied through that. At first, I just got the visiting position, and then I went through that next year, and that's how I ended up here at Wisconsin.
Oh, okay. So what were you
similar things? I taught administrative law. I taught natural resources law. I also taught a seminar on catastrophes in the law, which was really weird because it happened at the same time. The semester that I was teaching that was the same time Hurricane Katrina happened. So it actually ended up tracking exactly how I planned the syllabus. So that was kind of weird, but it was, good for the students. They actually really enjoyed it because of that.
Mm-hmm. But when you're teaching for the first time, like, how did you even know what to teach or what to focus on or anything? Like, were you supposed to follow somebody else's like course plan or just make something up?
Well, the catastrophes in law I made up, but the other ones, I kind of followed through the case book. So you can't usually, case books are made to be much larger than any professor can assign usually in a semester. So it allows you to sort of pick and choose which parts of it that you want to. So I had to go through the case book for administrative law and also for natural resources law and decide which parts I wanted to teach. But since I was pretty familiar with those areas, I could, sort of pick and choose the things that I thought would be important to students, the things that I thought would be less important. And I'm still, the major mistake that you make when you first teach is you're like, oh, everything's great, I'm going to assign everything. And then the students gave me some negative reviews for assigning too much.
I see. Well, what was your experience like that first year that you were teaching? Like, were you nervous, or did the students give you a hard time or anything like that?
It wasn't too bad. I was kind of nervous. It helped that I'd actually did some adjunct classes at Georgetown while I was at DOJ. Not substantive classes, but a sort of legal research and writing for law review editor kind of class, but it got me used to the sort of process of teaching. And plus I'd actually, I'd taught before as a grad student, although that was a very different circumstance. That was like chemistry labs. But I think because I'd had some of that experience, it wasn't so different, but it was still a little bit different. And it was still a little more nerve-wracking being on the podium, behind the podium, than it is now, where I'm much more used to it.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then, okay, so you went back to the meat market again. I think that's where Andrew and I saw you.
Yeah, I think so.
Meat market things, yeah. And so the second time around, did you feel like you had a lot more interviews because of your experience?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that it, I had more writing in my CV, so I'd published more by then. Having the visiting professorship, I think, made me stand out as seriously committed to, going into academia.
Mm-hmm. I see. And then how did you choose University of Wisconsin then? Like, did you fly around and try out different places or?
Yeah, I interviewed at a lot of places, and it was a place that at the time seemed to have the best offer to me. So that's how I chose Wisconsin. But I had not, I didn't have any strong prior connections to Wisconsin, which is the weird thing, right, about the academic teaching market is that, a lot of times you just end up where you end up. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so tell me about the city then, like Madison, what it's like. I've never even been there before.
It's, it's good and bad in many ways. So the good parts is it's got a lot of culture for a city its size. It's got a lot of arts. It's got a lot, just because of the University of Wisconsin, and also because Epic Systems is there. And I don't know if you've heard of Epic Systems, but they basically are like the database of all hospitals these days, or like the, record keeping thing. So that also is an industry that drives it. So there's that, and it's also the capital. So there's a lot of stuff to do there. One of the bad things about Wisconsin in general is it's got some of the worst racial disparities in the country, if not the actual worst racial disparities in the country, especially for African Americans, Native Americans, and Hmong Americans. And so it just, having that, and having, a lot of people in Madison think, okay, well, we're great liberals, everything's great, and not actually recognizing how disparate the impacts are for people is it's kind of hard to witness sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I see. And what about, are there that many Asians that are in the area?
There's not a ton of them. There's a number of them associated with the university. It's not really that many Asians. It's mostly white, really.
Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah. And so what kind of classes did you start off teaching then when you wound up at University of Wisconsin?
Administrative law, natural resources law, environmental law, kind of my teaching package that I came with. I moved on into teaching a few other things sort of in rotation. I also teach now food systems law, because I've been doing more research on food law. That's one thing that's in rotation. And then I also teach advanced contracts, which seems weird, but I'm interested in supply chains and supply chain contracting. And so this kind of works into my research bit, and students seem to like it. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, are most of your students in-staters?
I would say maybe it's about 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, and so I guess you're kind of lucky in that you're mostly teaching like second or third year students.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
because I don't know, it just seems like it would be hard to teach like 1L classes where maybe more of the students are just freaked out or keep wanting to talk to you and ask you questions.
Yeah, that's the nice thing is I don't have to deal with freaked out students. They're all broken in by the time they get to me, except for advanced contracts. Actually, that's optional for first years. So I do teach a few first years through that, but they're usually super gunners, honestly. So they're kind of confident enough.
Yeah, I see. And do you have tenure now?
I do. I have tenure now.
Oh, okay. So how long have you been a law professor then?
If you just count the time I was at Wisconsin, I've been there since 2006. So I guess 14 years now.
Oh, okay. Wow. Well, congratulations. Yeah. When did you get tenure? So long ago, huh?
Yeah,